Today we're talking about simple ways to play audio in Unity. At the heart of using sound are two main things, the audio source and the audio clip. The audio source is the component that plays the sound, and the audio clip is the sound file itself. We're going to set up two examples, one for a sound track and the other for a sound effect. I'll follow up with a more complex video on using sound managers shortly. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's jump into Unity. Let's say that we have an opening scene, and this is our main menu scene where we have a title and maybe a hero shot, and then our start game button. We want to have our audio immediately start playing, and so we're going to set up that functionality for our soundtrack. We've already received files from our sound designer and our composer, and we've drugged them already into our project window. And we can preview these files. If we just click on them and look in the inspector, we can change some settings, but most importantly right now, we can preview the sound. The other one is a short sound for the sound effect. And now that we have both of them, let's go ahead and implement a audio source to go along with our audio clips. I'm going to go into our hierarchy, hit create, drop down and find the audio source. It's going to create an object an empty object, an object with an audio source that's automatically called audio source. And I'm going to change the name to soundtrack. Then I'm going to drag in my soundtrack audio clip into the audio clip field. Once it's in there, you can see the name of the file. And the most important thing that we want to have is this play on awake checkbox. That means that the audio source will automatically play when this object enters the scene. From there, we can adjust some other parameters, like loudness, pitch, panning. If this game were in 3D, then we can adjust the way that it sounds as we move closer or away from it. But let's just test this out. This is play on awake. If we hit play, then great. So our soundtrack automatically starts playing. Another thing that we may want is if the player lingers and does not do anything, then we want this audio source to loop the file and loop endlessly. In the more complex video, we'll talk about how we can make our audio source continue to play after we change scenes. At the moment, every time that we change a scene, it'll stop because that audio source gets destroyed when the scene loads. We'll talk about how we might keep an object from being destroyed when we change scenes in a later video. Let's jump into the other scene and where we have one of our characters. And let's say that when the character collects a coin, we'll make a sound effect play. We'll select our character. In this case, it's Skelly. And we will add an audio source to our character. It's going to look just like the other one. And we're going to drag in from our sound folder that sound effect, in this case, a boom sound. We don't want this audio source to play immediately when we enter the scene, because this should be a reactionary or incidental sound. And so we'll uncheck play on awake. Now, this audio source is not going to play by itself. So we can write a separate script or append a script that already exists. We'll write, for simplicity's sake, we're going to write a separate script that's going to use an onTriggerEnter method. So we're going to say add component, script, new script, and we're going to type in play effect. As that component gets added, we're going to double click on it to open our code editor. Here's our play effect. And so this is different than when we had the sound effect, because the sound effect just automatically played. We didn't have to write any functionality or logic or type of behavior to make our audio source play. But the heart of it is we need to have our script, this code, talk to this audio source and tell it to play when we collect something. So a couple things that we need to know for Unity is we need to have the audio source, and I'm just writing comments so that we can follow our logic. We need an audio source, and then we need to have a reference to our audio source. So this first one will be an audio source variable. Then we need to grab the reference to our audio source, and then later on we need to have some sort of logic for when to play. First one that we need to do is we need to create a reference variable for an audio source, and we need to give it the data type of audio source, excuse me. And we will call it audio source, lowercase a audio source. Now that we have a reference variable, we haven't gotten a reference to this audio source yet. We could do a couple things. We could make this a serialize field and then be able to see that audio source in the code. Unity is going to recompile, and we see a blank here. We could easily just come here and drag from this bolded name into the field. That way we can grab the reference. That's definitely one way to do it. If we don't want to do that, then we could go to start and say our lowercase a audio source equal to get component of type audio source. And this line of code looks through the other components on our Skelly object and finds the audio source and then links it to this same spot. So if I were to remove this, set this to none, and hit play, we'll notice that the code is going to look through the other components in our object and find that same audio source there. Let's go back to the code because we haven't had it play yet. Let's copy this comment so that we know what's happening here. And lastly, we need logic for when we have to play. And so I said that we were going to wait until our character runs into something to play that sound. We're going to use our onTrigger enter 2D method. This is something we've been using for a while if you've been following the other videos. And we're basically waiting until our character hits something with a collider. And in this case, a collider with a trigger. And so we'll say if collision dot compare tag, we're going to look at the thing that we hit and see if it has a tag of, in this case, collectible. And from there, we're going to tell the audio source that we want it to play. Now, in my original slide, we said that there's a difference between play versus play one shot. And there's two reasons that we might use one or the other. Play versus play one shot tells the audio source to go ahead and play the audio clip that's on the audio source. If we look at it here, the audio source, we've drug in a particular clip already, boom. If we use play one shot, then we need to feed it the clip that we want to play in the code. But the nice thing about that is that we can overlap sounds if we happen to hit this one and this one because we're going to be playing from the same audio source. There's always going to be a give and take, and understanding the reasons you might use one thing versus the other is important. Let's just stick with the regular play in this case and see what happens. I want to make sure that I'm comparing the tag that's spelled collectible here. I'm going to look at these two guys here to make sure that their tag is collectible. I want to be spelling it correctly. This one is spelled the same way that I have it in the code, and this one too. So I hope that when I get into play, I jump into that, we actually hear that sound. And there you go. When we run into an object with a tag collectible, that's the first step of this outside bracketing. We run into an object with a collider, we compare that object to see if it has a tag of collectible, and then we tell the audio source to play. I hope that you found this helpful. Like and subscribe. There's going to be more complicated videos talking about more complex methods of playing audio shortly. Thanks. Talk to you later.